Who are you?
It doesn't matter. I'm certainly not Standartenführer Vogel any more than Berger here is the Desert Fox.
I see. You're some agent.
I said it doesn't matter. Sit down.
Very well. If you're going to shoot me. Get it over with.
Normally I would. But I've got an idea what you're up to, and the last thing I want to do is get in the way of a plot to kill Hitler.
You think I'm good just to sit here and let you go? Sleep.
Mazel tov. Night of the Fox continues after the news.
A movie premiere for next Tuesday on Thames. Tom Cruise stars in Cocktail.
This is the big time. Are you ready for the big time, young Mr. Flanagan?
I think I can handle it.
Together, one fry. All right. Now, what was it that you ordered? A martini. What's in that?
There are many ways to fool a customer. You will learn them all.
Yes, Obi-Wan.
You get the women, you get the bucks. Stick with me, son, I'll make you a star.
The movie premiere of Cocktail next Tuesday at 9.
Motoring abroad? Don't drive round in circles. Collect our free AA maps of Europe and avoid losing your head. Auto Express magazine gives you a lift every week.
Our research panel are testing 2 non-biological liquids. Using the recommended dosage, we'll be able to wash all these romper suits with 1 bottle of a new concentrated liquid until it runs out. And all these with 1 bottle of Fairy non-biological liquid. The Fairy costs more, but it goes further. In fact, over 100 romper suits further than the concentrated liquid. Bottle for bottle, Fairy non-biological goes further.
9 out of 10 people still aren't eating enough fibre. So it's worth knowing that in 5 portions of cabbage, there's the same amount of fibre as you'd find in just a single bowl of Kellogg's All Bran. Kellogg's All Bran, a great fibre provider.
A movie premiere tomorrow on Thames. Just dropping in, it's the one and only Crocodile Dundee in the smash hit sequel.
Oh, excuse me.
What's he like in bed? I don't know. He still sleeps on the floor.
What are your chances of getting out of here with that jacket on?
Better than average. There's Bushman. There's McDundee.
You know who that was?
What?
Clint Eastwood.
Okay, this isn't a game.
Hey.
Join him tomorrow at 8.
This is Thames Television. The news for the Thames area follows this evening at 10:35. But now the world situation from ITN at 10.
$1,100 jobs to go at 4 Yorkshire pits. French crash survivors watched fellow passengers freeze to death. UN to Libya, hand over Lockerbie bombers or face the consequences. Commons uproar, Major and Kinnock clash on the economy again. And the fighting factions in Georgia agree on a truce. Good evening. British Coal has made another move towards privatization, announcing streamlining plans thought to involve 1,100 redundancies. The company won't release the exact figures until tomorrow, after miners at 4 pits in Yorkshire have been told. British Coal says it wants to keep the pits competitive. It says redundancies would not be compulsory. Miners' leaders said they had been betrayed. In the Commons this afternoon, Mr. Major said he was sorry to hear about the job losses, but he said the future of the coal industry could only be secured if it produced coal people could afford. It's thought 410 jobs will go at Kellingley, 250 at the Prince of Wales, 250 at Charleston, and 200 at Whitemore.
Today's move is probably just the first in a series of cutbacks at Britain's pits this year, a reflection of the brutal new economics of the coal industry. Recently, miners in the Selby coalfield celebrated production records. It's one of the most efficient in Europe, yet still jobs are being shed at Selby's Whitemoor pit, as well as 3 others nearby. In the Commons, Labour's energy spokesman demanded explanations.
How long has this country got to go on, losing these jobs and losing this access to the great national assets that we have in our coal, instead of selling it off, as the government want to do, for a quick, overnight, cheap price for the Treasury?
I am sorry to hear of the job losses to which the honourable gentleman refers. But the only secure future for the coal industry, or indeed any other industry, is to put itself in a position where it is producing at a price people can afford something that people want. That is the only long-term future for the coal industry.
Some MPs fear there may be no long-term future for the coal industry. That's because the electricity generating companies want cheaper sources of energy. At present, power stations buy 80% of British coal's output. After 1993, they can buy imported coal instead. So British Coal is desperately trying to cut costs to make its coal cheaper, and jobs are going. The coal industry has shrunk dramatically since the mid-80s. In 1986 there were 133 pits and 138,000 miners. A year ago there were just 65 pits, 57,000 miners. After recently announced closures and the latest job losses, there'll be 51 pits and 46,000 miners.
British Coal are cutting back now simply because they're producing too much coal, their stockpiles are very high, and because what coal they're producing is much too expensively produced. And you'll see a lot more cutbacks like this, and you'll see more mine closures, I think, within a week or two.
Miners are angry. They say they're working harder than ever. Now they've been betrayed.
The miners have produced the goods over the last 5 or 6 years in particular, increasing productivity. And British Coal are quite eager to point that out to everybody and to stick their chests out and brag about that. And yet they're still quite prepared to go ahead and announce the job losses that they have done again today.
But British Coal management say some pits are still too inefficient. Cuts must be made if the company is to compete when it's privatised.
Survivors of last night's plane crash in western France have described how they waited, shivering in freezing conditions, for more than 4 hours to be rescued. They said they'd watched fellow passengers who'd also survived the crash then freeze to death. One of the 9 found alive called the rescue operation on the hills southwest of Strasbourg a shambles. A 13-month-old baby and a 9-year-old boy are among those being treated in hospital.
Perched on the very crest of the hill, this was where the search parties finally found the plane. All day they worked to remove the bodies of those killed. Some were still being recovered tonight. The Airbus was within feet of clearing the mountain top when its undercarriage hit the trees, tearing the fuselage apart. There was apparently no warning that the plane was flying dangerously low and no distress signal. It was in the tail section of the Airbus just behind me that most of the survivors were seated. Remarkably, after the accident, many of them were well enough to walk away and find their rescuers. But it was to be nearly 5 hours before those rescuers arrived. As some survivors wandered in the woods, others more severely injured huddled before a makeshift fire. Temperatures during the night had dropped to 10 degrees below freezing. It's thought many trapped in the plane simply died of exposure. Among the survivors, a 9-year-old boy. And the youngest of the passengers, 13-month-old Melisandre André, who was carried away in the arms of a soldier, apparently unscathed. It was a tortuous and distressing task. At least 2 of the survivors were critically injured. Others later spoke of the crash. This man said it lasted just a few seconds. We were thrown from left to right. Then it was dark and there was a deadly silence. Another survivor, who was 72 today, said his escape was his best ever birthday present. I feel like I've been reborn, he said. But this was, nevertheless, France's worst air crash in nearly 20 years. And the families of those who died remain as anxious as the investigators to know why it happened. Libby Wiener, News at 10, Strasbourg.
The A320 is the most sophisticated airliner ever built. The pilot uses an electronic joystick to fly the plane, and a myriad of dials in a conventional cockpit is replaced by computer screens. Indeed, computers control the plane, obeying the pilot's instructions via the joystick, and they can even take over if he makes a mistake, like stalling the engines.
And when I release the stick, look, automatic recovery of the airplane.
Pilots initially felt uncomfortable relying on computers so much, and when, 4 years ago, an A320 carrying out a low-level pass at an air show crashed into the trees, killing 3 passengers, questions were asked. But the investigation cleared the computers and blamed the pilot. Despite that, French pilots again today raised questions about the A320's safety. Experts here, however, point out the disturbing frequency of similar accidents, whatever the type of plane.
Last year, there were 11 aeroplanes, 11 airliners, which crashed into mountainsides, killing everybody on board. That's just in 1991 alone. Every year it happens.
Military planes have onboard radar that looks forward to warn pilots of sudden changes in the terrain. Some experts suggest commercial planes should follow suit.
The pilots have before them navigation displays which show an excellent picture of their route and of the facilities that they're flying over, but what it doesn't show is the terrain. And this could be done nowadays because the military technology is there. In fact, it would be, to my mind, not at all difficult.
In last night's accident, it seems the pilot was well below the minimum safety altitude. If planes had forward-looking radar, he might have known that.
The United Nations has ordered Libya to hand over 2 men wanted in connection with the Lockerbie bombing 3 years ago. The Security Council vote was unanimous. Diplomats described the move as unprecedented. Libya's representative told the UN the evidence provided by the US and Britain against the men was based on guesswork.
It's the first time the Security Council has stepped into a legal dispute between member states. Libya argued that it wasn't competent to do so.
It is as if we are faced with a new rule of law which runs counter to an established principle. That is, the accused is guilty until proven innocent.
Will those in favour of the draft resolution...
But the Libyan call to submit the dispute to arbitration was rejected outright.
Please raise their hand.
Even Morocco, the only Arab member of the 15-nation council, voted in favour of the resolution. The United States said the council had responded to a threat against international peace.
The effects of such conduct on international peace and security are clear and inescapable. 441 completely innocent people from 32 countries, including from 7 of the members of this council, were murdered in an act of blatant, cold-blooded, and brutal terrorism.
The resolution calls on Colonel Gaddafi's Libya to hand over suspects wanted in connection with the Lockerbie bombing in 1988 and the bombing of a French airliner over North Africa in 1989. Britain has named Abdel Basset al-Megrahi and Alamin Fima as the men it wants to stand trial.
And I hope very much that in the aftermath of this unanimous vote, there will be some fresh thinking on the part of the Libyan government and some fresh action, which is the most important of all.
The resolution doesn't say what will happen if Libya fails to comply. Another resolution calling for sanctions is thought likely if it doesn't.
The Prime Minister, Mr. Major, insisted today that Britain was poised to come out of recession. Mr. Major told the Commons there was now an opportunity for steady and sustained growth. Labour's Mr. Neil Kinnock said Britain was the only EC country in recession and accused the government of unique incompetence.
Today's renewed bitter feuding showed the parties do at least agree the economy remains the battleground for the general election. But that's where agreement ends. For while Labour says Britain's the only European country in recession, Mr Major said some were now heading for a downturn, just when...
Precisely the moment the United Kingdom economy is poised to come out of recession.
That met Labour derision. Mr Kinnock repeated the British economy was shrinking 2% while all others were growing.
This country and its people are paying the price for having a government of unique incompetence.
No, sir. No, sir. Almost every country of the industrial world is experiencing economic problems.
He went on that unemployment was rising in countries like France and the USA. Mr Kinnock countered,
Unemployment is going up faster, investment is lower, and production has fallen more than in any other European country.
After more heated exchanges, even the Speaker concluded,
My judgment, the election campaign started when we came back from the Christmas recess.
And so it seemed, as the parties tried to set their own political agenda. At today's press conference, the Tories upped their assessment of Labour's spending plans to £37 billion.
To pay for Labour's promises, the average taxpayer would end up being hit by an extra £1,000 tax bill.
Tomorrow night's political broadcast says that adds up to £35 billion. Proof Labour says they can't get their sums right. But in this political sumo wrestling, Labour tried to maintain the advantage with figures on British business failures, over 2,000 a week, which they said showed Britain deep in recession. The Liberal Democrats, afraid of being squeezed in the publicity stakes in the run-up to an election, charted what they said was Britain's decline over 40 years.
I will not take part in this exchange of ridiculous, childish insults. What we want to do is put across a message of hope and say to the people of Britain that the real change you need is a change from 40 years of failure under Tory and Labour.
But at least tomorrow, one important detail in the political calendar will become clear when the government announces the date of the next budget. It's expected to be March the 10th, which in turn would clear the way for an election in April. Mark Webster News at 10, Westminster.
The government's inviting a further 5,000 family doctors to take control of their own budgets. GP fund holders, as they're known, can decide where and how to get treatment for their patients. 1,700 GPs already belong to the scheme. The Health Secretary, Mr William Waldegrave, said today doctors were queuing up to join. Both Labour and the Liberal Democrats said fund holding was creating a two-tier health system.
The government says it's extending GP fund holding because it's a clear success. Labour has always said it plans to get rid of the internal market reforms. This afternoon it made it clear that that meant abolishing fund holding.
We will do it because we will not tolerate two-tier lists in which the length of time you wait depends on the size of your GP's budget. There's a word for that. It is double standards, and Labour will clear it out of the NHS.
Now I offer to the Honourable Member for Livingston my heartfelt thanks for almost the first straight answer I have ever extracted from him. I believe he has, in a single word, delivered to us the votes of the majority of general practitioners in the country.
At present, only 1,700 of Britain's 25,000 GPs are fund holders. Today's announcement means 5,000 more doctors will become eligible. The British Medical Association opposes the scheme. Many of its non-fund holding members fear their patients are receiving less favourable treatment from hospitals eager to give priority to doctors with their own purchasing power.
I believe that our patients are having to wait longer for routine surgical, gynecological assessments, for certain routine orthopaedic assessments, and for physiotherapy.
Fund holders, on the other hand, say the services to their patients have improved, and tonight they responded angrily to Labour's plan.
We'd lose the opportunity to provide more services in practices. We'd lose the opportunity to bring consultants in, to bring physiotherapy in, to bring counselling in. The whole thing would be terribly retrograde.
Independent research due out next month will back the government's view that fund holding is working. But with an election approaching, the political debate surrounding fund holding can only grow.
Only about 5% of GPs hold their own budgets, and as long as you've therefore got the overwhelming majority who are not budget holders, but some who are, and who enjoy preferential referral for their patients as a result, you've got a two-tier health service.
The government believes patients are already feeling the benefits of its reforms, and it hopes that as more practices take over their own budgets, any fears of preferential treatment will die down. Jennifer Nadel, News at 10, Central London.
The government's to give £8 million in the next 3 years to help find accommodation for the mentally ill who sleep rough in London. There'll be more psychiatric backup and more hostel places. We have a report next. Plus, New York's mafia godfather is finally brought to trial. And the Marcos thirst for power. Now Imelda wants to be president too. That's in a couple of minutes.
I'm going to make you great again. The people want you back.
JJ wants his document in an hour.
OK, I'll do it. Don't panic.
What can I do?
Early retirement? I've only got one pair of hands.
Oh, half. Go on.
Anita, emergency. 5 charts to get your own tea bag.
Donna!
Rank Xerox laser printers are designed to be shared. Robust, fast and so reliable, each one is available with our total satisfaction guarantee. Is it all right?
Donna, I'm speechless.
Oh, that's nice.
Faxing, scanning, copying, printing. Rank Xerox, the document company.
Fresh-tasting Sensodyne F's special ingredient quickly helps calm the nerves that cause the pain of sensitive teeth.
India. Only 9 hours away.
Anyway, I was in the post office when she comes in, picking up a HGV licence application. Not for him with an articulate lorry. And the Pacamac and the sideboards. All I'll say is he was in the post office opening a joint national savings account Tuesday last. Ooh, I thought there'd never be more than one slice in his toaster. Don't look. Him on the 73. He was in for a bus pass and a look at the electoral register. And I think we all know whose particulars he's been taking down. He never is. And then you, Nigel. He comes in the post office to get some photos enveloped. Fancy. Apparently he's got one of those paranoid cameras.
Keep calm. Nobody panic.
Looks like an insurance job.
Call Direct Line on 081 686 2468.
The government is to try to reduce the number of mentally ill people sleeping rough in London by spending £8 million over the next 3 years. There'll be more short-term hostel places and extra backup from psychiatrists. Charity workers said there's nothing new in the package. Labour said much of the money was already accounted for.
This is the Anson Road Hostel in Manchester, one of 5 examined by the government and typical of the type of hostel accommodation they want to see extended throughout the country. Every one of the hostel's 20 residents has their own room, and there are over 30 permanent staff, all trained in psychiatric care.
What we have here is a unit that provides 24-hour-a-day nursing care for 10 people in a community setting. And I think that's one part of a range of community services and hospital services that we need to develop.
The government report claims thousands of mentally ill people now sleeping rough would benefit from this form of full-time care. Father Barry Carpenter's parish takes in the rough sleepers of Lincoln's Inn Fields, a few hundred yards from the High Court in London.
What is so alarming is that it seems to become acceptable that in days gone by, people would have been alarmed to see somebody helpless sleeping out on the streets. No longer.
But the government's talk of a new initiative has been criticised by one voluntary group who claimed the recommendations contain nothing new.
One must have one's doubts when an idea like hospital hostels, as old as 1975, is dusted down and presented as somehow something new, and at the same time no resources follow this new drive.
Anson Road costs some £400,000 a year to run. The government claimed changes in mental health care will help provide other health authorities with the resources they need.
Part of the resource for developing the new health service for mentally ill people must come from the releasing resources out of the old model of care, the old Victorian hospitals, which are no longer appropriate to their needs.
But until new facilities do appear, others must cope with the frustrations on Britain's wintry streets. WPC Sally Giles' beat covers Lincoln's Inn Fields, and she welcomes the halfway hostel initiative.
And obviously it would make my job a little easier. We have outreach workers that come round and try and help them, but they face problems as well for beds. There's sometimes a lack of beds for them.
However welcome this initiative may be in principle, its timescale leaves it largely irrelevant to thousands who'll be sleeping rough on freezing streets throughout the country for many weeks to come this winter. Robert Hall, News at 10, Central London.
There's a new political crisis in Ireland tonight. The country's former Justice Minister has claimed that the Prime Minister, Mr. Charles Hockey, did know about an illegal phone tapping operation 9 years ago. Until tonight, Mr. Sean Doherty had claimed that the Prime Minister knew nothing. But at a press conference in Dublin, where he announced his resignation as Chairman of the Irish Senate, Mr. Doherty said he'd passed Mr. Hockey transcripts of the phone conversations.
Each and every one of these relevant transcripts were transported by me to Mr. Hockey's office and handed to him directly. He retained all but one of them, making no comment on their content. At no stage did he indicate disapproval of the action which had been taken.
The Northern Ireland Secretary, Mr. Peter Brooke, has written to the four main political parties in the province, inviting them to a new round of talks. No date or venue has been set. An eighth man has died following last Friday's van bombing by the IRA near Cookstown. He was Mr. Oswald Gilchrist, the van's driver.
There have been talks in Georgia on a ceasefire between forces of Georgia's overthrown president and the provisional government in Tbilisi. It's not clear tonight whether the fighting has actually stopped. In the run-up to the talks, government forces captured a number of strategic western positions held by Gamsakhodia supporters, including the bridge at Samtredia.
It was always going to be a vital day for President Gamsakhodia's makeshift army. They are outgunned and outnumbered, but they moved forward this morning to try and halt the inexorable advance of their enemies. Armoured personnel carriers, no match for the tanks and rocket launchers ranged against them, were resupplied with fresh ammunition. But the battle that ensued was one-sided. We were taken with an ambulance convoy to the front. There had been reports of several casualties. A mile or two behind me, a fierce battle has been raging all day for control of the strategic bridge. We're told it's too dangerous to approach any closer than this, but reports are that Gamsakhodia's men are being pushed back down this road towards us. Within hours of the battle starting, men fighting for their deposed president were in full retreat, buses commandeered to take them out of the battle zone. Other men rode back with the casualties in ambulances. They had lost the bridge they were defending. The road into the heart of western Georgia was now wide open to the men who seized power in the capital Tbilisi 2 weeks ago. At a nearby hospital, operating theatres were filled with casualties. This man was the driver of one of the armoured personnel carriers we had seen this morning. He told us how he'd been hit by rocket fire, the members of his crew now lying in the ward beside him. And tonight, talk of a ceasefire. Those still loyal to the president say the terms at the moment are unacceptable, but so far their leader has not even dared to show his face in public. There is now some doubt about how much longer these men will improvise, fight, and even give their lives to defend him. James Mates, News at 10, Western Georgia.
The trial of the man said to be New York's most powerful mafia boss opened in Brooklyn today. John Gotti is accused of murder, racketeering and extortion. He's known as Teflon Don because prosecutors have so far failed to make any charges against him stick. This time, though, the authorities say they're confident they have enough evidence to put him behind bars for life.
America's most infamous mafia boss was brought to court in a heavily protected convoy, sharpshooters on the streets. The henchman who took his orders, powerless now to protect a man who has eluded the law so often.
Good evening, Mr. Gotti.
John Gotti, known as the Dapper Don, faces charges that include extortion, illegal gambling, and principally 5 murders, this shooting the most notorious. Paul Costellano was head of the Gambino family, the country's most powerful, until it's alleged Gotti had him shot and then took control.
Genovese.
It's Gotti's 4th trial in 5 years. On every other occasion, he's been acquitted.
Not guilty.
The jury choosing to believe his story that he's an innocent £20,000 a year plumbing salesman. But this time, the FBI have secret audio tapes they say prove Gotti ordered killings. And they have mafia informers, 3 of them, including the man who was for years Gotti's most trusted friend. Betrayals, a deadly mafia feud in recent weeks, the collapse of old strongholds. The mafia is just like the Soviet Union, said one FBI official. Dictatorial control and mindless loyalty isn't working anymore.
Oh, they're struggling. We know more about their organization than they do. And that's their weakness. It's secrecy even amongst themselves.
What do you think that will mean for the mafia in 10 years' time?
Hopefully, we're going to remove them as a significant threat to our society.
And the mafia is being squeezed. The FBI on one side, the recession on the other. It's hitting their income. From control of fish distribution to the struggling construction industry, the pickings aren't what they used to be. At John Gotti's home today, the yellow ribbons were out, along with the plastic ducks in the front garden. Support from the locals too, but if the FBI is right, it may be some time before they see their neighbour again. If he's convicted, Gotti faces a life sentence. If he's acquitted, he faces a death sentence. His victims' families have put a price on his head. Either way, Gotti loses. Bill Neely, News at 10, Brooklyn, New York.
Mrs. Imelda Marcos, the widow of the former president of the Philippines, has told hundreds of cheering supporters she will now run for the presidency. She claims that if she's re-elected, it will mean the people don't believe she embezzled huge amounts of money during her husband's rule. Mrs. Corrie Aquino has already said she won't run again.
Surrounded by supporters, Imelda Marcos puts her presidential ambitions in writing, and the campaigning has already begun. A bid to win over the people she and her family are accused of robbing to the tune of billions of dollars. These are the middle-class Marcos faithful, literally throwing money at the election hopeful dubbed the richest woman in the world. At campaign time, the Marcos shoes are made for dancing. For Imelda, vote winning is a cabaret. In the eyes of the adoring, she's done no wrong.
For us, and that Marcos was not a taker but a giver, and we would like to say that that is history now.
In a £100,000 Mercedes, she cruises through the slums to a rally of the poor. 6,000 street sweepers were promised, 600 showed up, and half of them were paid to be there. The speeches brought tears to hired eyes. Such is the extent of political corruption here, Imelda Marcos can and is buying loyalty aplenty. Money talks in the Philippines, particularly at election time. And money is something Imelda Marcos has plenty of. A meeting of born-again Christians provides another platform for Mrs. Marcos. On nationwide television, she proclaims her innocence of corruption charges and says God will help her. In the Philippines, they pray for many things.
Be closer to her more than ever before, Lord.
But for Mrs. Marcos to return to the presidential palace is surely a miracle too many. Mark Austin, News at 10, Manila.
One soccer result tonight in the B&Q Scottish League Division 2. Clyde and Stenhousemuir drew 0-0. Cricket in the first test in Christchurch, the latest score, New Zealand 98 for 2. They lost a wicket in England's first over today.
That's News at 10 tonight. From Alistair and from me, good night.
Next, the ITV National Weather. That's followed by the latest Thames area news with Robin Houston, and then the concluding part of Night of the Fox. Stay with us on Thames.
Snowy! Up here. What is it? I can see the pub from here.
Australians wouldn't give a Castlemaine 4X for anything else.
Motoring abroad? Don't drive round in circles. Collect our free AA maps of Europe and avoid losing your head. Auto Express magazine gives you a lift every week.
You know I'm waiting, just anticipating things I may never possess. While I'm without them, try a little tenderness. Try a little tenderness.
Bounty, the taste of paradise.
Full of instinct, your Whiskers cats. They know how to tell you what they like. And you can be sure that Whiskers, the world's most preferred cat food, is full of everything they need and love. Cats instinctively know what they like and what's good for them. Cats would buy Whiskers.
Replens. One application maintains feminine moisture for up to 3 days. Replens. It lasts and lasts.
Ah, now you're using one of the best regular washing powders. Will you try Daz Ultra instead?
No, I'm happy with mine.
This is a totally different kind of Daz.
No, I've tried Daz before. I was dead surprised. And such a small amount of powder, I thought, no chance, it's not going to work. I've got 4 boys. They were supposed to be playing football, but I think they just roll around in the mud, actually. It's becoming rotten dirty. I was surprised. It did work. I know they all say this, but it did work. The whites were really bright. They weren't like a chewing gum white, which I say is a dirty looking white. They were really bright. I was amazed at the cup. I didn't think anything was going to get that out.
So would you swap 2 packs of your old powder for Daz Ultra?
No, I'm not going back to those big packs.
When you can get Ultra White at a price that's right, would you swap?
Hey, don't I know you from somewhere?
That's original.
Emerson High, 1975. You're in my class.
I was your teacher.
What helps keep skin looking young? Oil of Ulate twice a day. It works like skin's natural fluids to replace lost moisture.
Miss Fitzhenry?
Bugsy Brown.
Oil of Ulate twice a day.
Wow.
The secret of young-looking skin.
Okay, you can go cheaper than Thompson Price Breakers, but we wouldn't recommend it.
Good evening. Temperatures already below freezing in many parts of Britain and tumbling fast. Frost is likely to affect almost the whole of Britain tonight, except perhaps the far north and west there, where it's going to stay fairly breezy. We're not suffering alone though. It's been a bitterly cold day across the whole of Europe. Temperatures around -15 at breakfast time this morning in central parts of Europe, as you can see. It's not going to be quite that cold tonight, but it's going to be cold enough, perhaps around -5 to -8 degrees Celsius tonight in many places, as you can see. The far north and west hangs on to rather more in the way of wind and some patchy cloud too, so temperatures there never quite below freezing. But for the rest of us, clear starry skies and a widespread frost. It does mean, though, another gloriously sunny day tomorrow. Lots of sunshine across the whole of Britain, really, I think. Some patches of cloud turning up around some of the coasts. But in the far north and west there, you'll have a fair bit of cloud, rather persistent layers of cloud, and a few spots of rain to come, mostly, though, right up in the far north. Winds tomorrow, well, for most of us, not very strong, but up in the north and west, fairly strong southerly breeze there. So So the temperatures for tomorrow, well, after such a cold start, it's going to be a struggle, of course, but should get up to around 1 or 2 degrees for most of us. There'll be the odd spot, though, that stays below freezing right through the day. More of this very cold, but fairly dry and wonderfully sunny weather to come over the next few days. That's it from me. Here's the summary.
She runs a famous family firm that employs few women in top jobs and even fewer black people. Her staff are paid by us, but she can ignore the discrimination laws. Some say it's wrong.
It's not just the ethnic minorities and the feminist lobby that's got a case. It's 95% of the country.
Some say it's right.
No, I don't think the Queen should be seen taking a lead.
What do you think? With an exclusive poll on the Queen's royal household this week, Thursday at 8:30 on Thames.
Good evening. Wards at 2 Essex hospitals have been closed to new admissions after 18 elderly patients died in just over a fortnight. Tonight, public health officials are urgently trying to find out if the deaths were all caused by the same virus.
12 of the 23 patients on Prittlewell ward at Rochford Hospital have died since the beginning of the month. Acutely ill elderly patients are treated on the ward. Those that died suffered from flu-like symptoms and a chest infection. Alarmed at the spate of deaths, a charge nurse alerted the local public health department. Meanwhile, 6 elderly patients at Orsett Hospital in Grays have died from similar symptoms. Both Ward 19 at Orsett and the Prittlewell ward have been closed to new admissions.
People tend to say to you, well, of course, this kind of illness is the old man's friend, and we do have excessive deaths at this time of year. But as DPH, I'm not really prepared to accept that. I decided we must look at the situation, which is what we're doing.
Tonight, infection control measures are in force at both hospitals. Nurses are wearing protective clothing and visitors monitored for symptoms of the illness. Microbiologists are trying to determine the source of the flu virus. Both wards will remain closed to new admissions until given the all clear.
It's been claimed that tube passengers are more at risk than ever, despite a drop in crime figures. The number of crimes reported last year fell by nearly 4%, but the Association of London Authorities says because fewer people are using the tube, the crime rate has actually risen. Meanwhile, there's been a surge in attacks on the Underground's police, with 1 officer in 4 being assaulted. An extra £6 million will be spent improving security. Teachers' leaders say more children than ever before are playing truant from the capital's schools, and they claim that government plans to tackle the problem will only make it worse.
These youngsters are just a handful of the thousands of pupils who are skipping lessons throughout London every day. This afternoon, instead of studying in the classroom, they were spending their time outside a newsagent's in Hendon.
School's boring and you get a better time if you're outside school, you can have a laugh. And when you're at school, like, the teacher always telling you what to do, but like if you smoke and that, you can't smoke at school. If you're outside, you can have a cigarette like when you want.
Teachers say that new government regulations which will force schools to publish a league table of unauthorised absence will cause more problems than they'll solve.
There are plenty of examples, it's well known in the teaching profession, you know, the phony sick note or the phony absence note, where the absence is authorised but it's spurious. So you could have schools with very good attendance records with a lot of concealed truancy, or the other way round.
Tonight, the government responded to the teachers' criticisms, saying they are attempting to compile a nationwide survey on truancy numbers. In the meantime, they say the legal responsibility still rests with the parents to make sure their child goes to school.
The funeral has taken place of Jim Morrison, the off-duty police detective stabbed to death by a handbag thief in London's West End. Detective Constable Morrison was buried in the Western Isles of Scotland. He was murdered a month ago when he confronted the bag snatcher after a chase through the capital's theatreland. Police are still hunting his killer. There's a warning tonight that homelessness could be to blame for a growth in tuberculosis. A doctor at King's College Hospital in London says extra powers are needed to keep track of sufferers who complete only part of their treatment before returning to the streets. Officials recruiting staff for the Disney park in France say they've had to fly in extra personnel to cope with the crowd of applicants in London. Euro Disneyland near Paris opens in 12 weeks' time. Construction is complete and now 12,000 staff are being recruited, over 10% of them from Britain. Interviews have been taking place at the Langham Hilton Hotel in the West End. A bizarre fleet of inflatable flying objects loomed over Wembley today. Among them were an inflatable pig and a giant King Kong gorilla. This 75-feet-long dragon was too big to fit into the outdoor events trade exhibition. The blow-ups have a serious purpose. They're used for promotion by firms which want to give their business a lift. The Thames weather tonight, dry and clear with widespread frost as the temperature drops to -5 Celsius, 23 Fahrenheit. Tomorrow will be dry and mostly sunny, but again very cold with the temperature of only 2 Celsius. That's the Thames News on Tuesday, January the 21st. Good night.
A movie premiere for tomorrow on Thames. It's the return of the Outback's finest export, Crocodile Dundee.
Don't try to stop me.
I don't want to stop you, I just want to get past.
What are you doing up there? You scared me.
This is more than a view.
What are your chances of getting out of here with that jacket on?
Better than average.
You gotta be Dundee.
He's on form in Manhattan, and just wait till he's in action in the bush.
Take your brow off.
It's hardly the time.
There a bushman? And there's Mick Dundee.
Do you know where they are?
They're 500 yards that way.
How do you know that?
I just know it.
They're sweat?
Wally's aftershave.
There might be real crocs down there. Where do you think I got this fella?
Crocodile Dundee II, the premiere on Thames, tomorrow at 8.
Next, the final part of Night of the Fox. That's followed by Prisoners, Cell Block H on Thames.
It's back for a new series on Thames, and on board the El Cid, there's a brand new crew member.
I prefer if you didn't call me Dad, all right?
It'll spoil your image.
Well,
Douglas, don't worry.
But some things don't change.
do you know what I'm going to do now, Graham?
No. Get out, boat! Father and daughter, apart, they're formidable.
Together, they're unstoppable.
El Cid returns to Thames next Monday at 9.
A dose of even the most effective cough medicine will only work for a few hours. So Beecham have developed cough caps, a capsule that gives up to 8 hours relief. That can mean a complete night's sleep or a cough-free working day without making you drowsy. Beecham cough caps, up to 8 hours cough relief day or night.
Wild thing, I think I love you.
Crystal Palace hope it's second time lucky tomorrow. Victory over Nottingham Forest will guarantee a lucrative Rumbelows Cup semi-final clash with London rivals Tottenham Hotspur. And a plum tie awaits Peterborough too. Manchester United in the semi-finals if they can beat Middlesbrough at Ayresome Park. Plus league action from Old Trafford and Championship boxing. 10 Sports Special tomorrow after news at 10.
Now we continue Night of the Fox.
Thank you, Hans. Are you absolutely sure?
Oh yes, quite definite. I'll show you. See the discoloration?